Good afternoon, colleagues. We would start with the afternoon session. Hope you had a good lunch, and we will start with agenda item 12, which is the analysis and synthesis of national reports for the period 2018-2020. The report is contained in AEWA MOP8 8.13, the document 8.13, and the relevant document AEWA MOP 8.14 will be considered in the working group. I would like to invite Aude Caromel from the WCMC to give us her report. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As mentioned, UNEP WCMC were commissioned to provide the analysis of the parties' national reports for the triennium 2018-2020. It's contained in full in document 8.13, and the document also contains 2 additional chapters, one on re-establishment projects and one on introduced non-native species of water birds gathered through a separate reporting module. In the interest of keeping to time, I'll only focus here on the national reports analysis, but please do come talk to me about the other chapters after if you're interested. So the national reporting template consisted of 101 primary questions with subsequent follow-up questions, and we'd like to thank all of the parties who submitted their data. In total, 53 parties submitted their data through the online reporting system by the extended deadline, 32 Eurasian parties and 21 African parties, which in total represented 67% of the contracting parties expected to report for the triennium. As you know, the national reporting template is designed to help assess progress towards the targets within the 5 objectives of the strategic plan. So just to give you a bit of a refresher of the strategic plan, it aligns around these 5 objectives, so around species conservation, ensuring that use of water birds is sustainable, protecting key sites for water birds, ensuring that they have access to good quality habitat, and ensuring that parties have all the resources they need to reach these first 4 objectives. As this is the first reporting cycle within the period covered by the strategic plan, the analysis provides a benchmark against which to assess progress in future reporting cycles, and it can help to identify areas to prioritize over the coming triennia to ensure that the strategic plan is successfully met. So this table provides an overview of the targets for which indicators can be assessed via the national reports and gives you an idea of the baseline evaluation for each of these targets. As you can see, there are different levels of accomplishment for each of the targets, but overall there is progress to be made in each of the 5 objectives of the strategic plan. So I'm going to quickly look at each of the 5 objectives. So looking at objective 1, which is around strengthening species conservation and recovery, and reducing unnecessary mortality. Indicators for 3 of the 6 strategic plan targets under this objective could be looked at through the national reports, and we'll look at just target 1.1 and 1.5. Throughout the rest of the presentation, these indicator charts show the proportion of success, and the diamond shows the target, what needs to be achieved for the indicator to be considered fully achieved. So target 1.1 invites parties to transpose into their domestic legislation all of the legal measures required in the AEWA action plan regarding fully prohibiting or regulating take, disturbance, use and trade of water birds of specified populations, and prohibiting non-selective modes of taking. And through the national reports, we can see that only 10% of parties had done this for all populations occurring in their country. And overall, only 7 out of the 221 populations in Table 1, Column A could be confirmed as fully protected across their range, although it should be noted that the evaluation of the coverage is somewhat limited by the incomplete responses in some reports and the missing reports from those parties that didn't submit any data. On a more positive note, we are halfway to achieving target 1.5, which aims for decision-making for conservation to be based on the best available monitoring data, and 51% of parties reported that they used the International Waterbird Census data or other such relevant monitoring data to inform their national level implementation. On to Objective 2, which aims to ensure that use and management of waterbirds is sustainable across their flyways. Indicators for 4 out of the 6 targets under this objective could be looked at through the national reports. And again, we're picking out just 2 of them, Target 2.2 and 2.5. Target 2.2 invites parties again to transpose into their domestic legislation all legal measures in the AEWA action plan, this time regarding sustainable use, phasing out lead shot, and reducing illegal taking. And again, only 11% of parties reported having done so. However, one of the targets that is well underway to being achieved is Target 2.5 on promoting ecotourism, with 35% of parties having reported ecotourism initiatives specifically based on migratory waterbirds and their habitat, with the overall aim for achievement of this indicator being 50%. On to Objective 3, which seeks for a comprehensive flyway network of managed protected areas and other sites for waterbirds. Again, indicators for 4 out of the 5 targets of the strategic plan could be assessed by the national reports, and the 2 we're looking at are 3.3 and 3.5. So Target 3.3 looks for the flyway sites of international and national importance for waterbirds to be actively protected and managed. And the parties reported that 42% of the flyway sites had legal protection as protected areas, but the proportion with actively implemented management plans remained low at 20%. On a positive note for flyway sites, 61% of parties reported having adopted measures to avoid, mitigate, or compensate for adverse impacts of human pressures on the flyway sites. Now, Objective 4, ensuring that waterbirds have access to high-quality habitat. Only 1 target under this objective could be looked at with the national reports. Target 4.4 instructs parties to establish international multi-stakeholder partnerships to guide habitat management and restoration projects, and 18 such projects were reported as being implemented or completed in the last triennium. Finally, on to Objective 5, which is around strengthening knowledge, capacity, awareness, and resources, and indicators for 4 of the 6 strategic plan targets under this objective could be looked at with the national reports. Target 5.3 is about prioritizing capacity gaps, restricting AEWA implementation. And although 35% of parties have established national AEWA implementation coordination mechanisms, more focus is needed on identifying and prioritizing the capacity gaps, as only 4% of parties reported having done this exercise. However, over half of parties reported that migratory waterbird conservation priorities were explicitly addressed in their national biodiversity strategies and action plans or similar national plans, as is required under Target 5.5. So what are the key messages from this initial reporting cycle? Overall, there are ongoing positive steps towards achieving some of the targets, but more work is needed across all 5 objectives of the strategic plan. There is good progress in the use of monitoring data and in integration of migratory waterbird priorities into national processes relating to biodiversity, but priority areas for action are integrating species conservation and protection of habitats into decision-making and legislation. So capacity building and additional mechanisms to support parties in these areas could be considered. And finally, actions were often not completed due to a lack of available financial and technical resources in countries, so adequate assessment of resource needs and subsequent mobilization will be essential to achieving the aims of the strategic plan. So that's my summary of the national reports, but please do consult the document and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the WCMC for this report. And now I open the floor for any questions or comments with regard to the report. I see no hands are raised, so I take that the meeting of the parties take note of the report. Thank you very much. Now I turn to the next agenda item, next report, item 13, analysis and synthesis of the reports on the implementation of the Plan of Action for Africa, which is contained in document AEWA MOP 8.15. Document AEWA MOP 8.16 under this agenda item will be considered by the Scientific and Technical Working Group later. For the report, I invite Chiara Stafford from the WCMC to give us the report. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chair. And thank you very much to the Secretariat as well for the opportunity to present this report at this meeting. Right. Okay. So, as you're all aware, the Plan of Action for Africa is intended to act as a guide for African parties aiming to fulfill the 5 objectives of the AEWA Strategic Plan, which you've just seen in the previous presentation, but which I'll reiterate, focus around, firstly, species conservation, secondly, ensuring sustainable use of water birds, 3, on protected areas, 4, on ensuring that water birds have access to high-quality habitat, and then 5thly, on ensuring that parties have all of the resources that they need in order to reach these 4 other objectives. So as Evelyn explained previously, the current Plan of Action for Africa is the second of its kind. So the first one ran from 2012 to 2018. This current plan started in 2019, and it will run to the end of 2027. So similar to the process in place for assessing parties' progress through their AEWA national reports, progress towards the implementation of the Plan of Action for Africa is tracked using a questionnaire, which asks African parties whether they've been able to implement a particular list of actions. So different actions are planned to be carried out at different stages of the plan. This first iteration of the questionnaire focused on actions that parties should aim to achieve in the first reporting period, which lasted from 2019 to 2020. Of the 82 AEWA parties in total, 38 are African parties, and 53% of those 38 African parties, so that's 20 out of a possible 38, submitted their Plan of Action for Africa reports by the deadline. Southern Africa was a sub-region with the highest reporting rate of 86%, which you can see in the map and in the accompanying pie charts. So the next slides are going to provide a summary of what all of these reports showed. However, as there's some regional variation in reporting rates, some caution is needed in assuming that these results are entirely representative of the African region overall. Okay, so this slide shows the results of the questionnaire in a nutshell. So the figure on the slide has the 5 objectives of the strategic plan down the side. And then the bars show you the average percentage of parties across all questions related to that objective that answered that yes, a particular action related to that objective has been achieved during this reporting period. So in order for those bars to be at 100%, all parties would have had to have reported that they've completed all actions related to that objective that were asked about in the reporting module. It should also be remembered that the percentages in this figure refer to reporting parties only, so they're out of a total of 20, and they don't refer to the percentage of African parties overall. So our results suggest that most progress on average has been made towards meeting objective 4. So that's ensuring that there's enough habitat in the wider environment to conserve waterbird populations. And as you can see in the figure, on average 52% of reporting parties said that they had achieved any particular action towards this objective that was planned for the first reporting period. Moderate progress has been made in achieving actions towards Objective 3. So that's establishing and maintaining a network of protected areas for waterbirds along the AEWA flyway. And towards Objective 5, which is about ensuring that parties have the resources required for the agreement to reach its 4 other objectives. So in both cases, an average of around a third of reporting parties said that they've achieved any particular action towards this objective that was planned for the first reporting period. Lastly, objectives where least progress has been made to date are Objective 1, which is about strengthening species conservation, and Objective 2, which is ensuring that the use of waterbirds is sustainable. So in these cases, an average of only 26% and 18% of parties said that they had achieved any particular action towards these objectives for the first reporting period. It should be noted when we're looking at this figure that some objectives required far more actions than others during this first reporting phase. So as such, they might have been much harder for parties to achieve and they would have required a lot more resources to implement. So for example, in this first reporting round, African parties were asked to report on 15 actions that were related to the completion of Objective 1. But they were only asked to report on 4 actions that were related to the completion of Objective 4. And this is because the bulk of actions that are needed for Objective 4 are planned to be carried out later in the plan's implementation period. Going forward, however, the results highlight a need for a general focus on helping parties to achieve actions towards meeting Objectives 1 about species conservation and 2 about ensuring sustainable use. I'd also like to highlight that 11 of the questions asked during this reporting period related to actions that were considered to be of the highest priority. So this graph shows a summary of the responses to those 11 questions. I don't have time, unfortunately, to go through them all individually, but what I thought I'd do is highlight 3 that might be priorities going forward, given the low number of parties who said that they'd completed these actions. So questions 2.3 and 2.4 asked about whether parties had reviewed their domestic legislation in response to amendments to the AEWA annexes that were made at MOP8. And only 1 party reported that such a review had been carried out. So a possible focus area might be on ensuring that parties have the resources and also the capacity to carry out these sorts of legislative reviews. Question 5.7, on the other hand, asked whether parties had developed a national AEWA Plan of Action implementation plan. And only 3 out of the 20 reporting parties reported that they started developing one. So again, this could be a key focus area going forward. So to summarize, what are the key takeaway messages arising from this first reporting period? So I guess the percentage of parties achieving the actions planned for this reporting period aren't perhaps what we might like them to have been. However, we need to remember that 2020 was an extraordinary year in which the COVID pandemic likely had a huge impact on the normal implementation and the reporting of AEWA obligations. Based on what the data tell us, however, as I've said before, a general focus on helping parties to achieve actions towards meeting Objectives 1 and 2 of the AEWA strategic plan should be a key priority going forward. And then secondly, particular targeted action is needed to help parties achieve the priority actions that I highlighted in the previous slide. I'd note that the reasons given by reporting parties as to why actions hadn't yet been completed were often to do with a lack of resources or of technical and financial capacity. And obviously addressing these shortfallings is also going to be key to ensuring that the aims of the plan are met by the time that it finishes in 2027. I'll finish by saying that's what's encouraging is that while many parties might not have completed particular actions, many of them reported that they were laying the groundwork to do so. So we would expect results from the next reporting period to show greater progress towards the implementation of these actions that were expected to have been delivered during the first reporting phase. So I'll leave it there. We'd like to thank all of the African parties who submitted their data, as well as the Secretariat for their comments and their insight on initial drafts of the analysis. If you have any questions or you'd like to discuss any aspects of it in more detail, then my email is at the bottom of the slide, or please come find me in the margins. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chiara, for the report. And now I open the floor. Should there be any questions or comments with regard to it? It doesn't seem to be the case, so thank you very much. The report is noted. Let me turn to our next agenda item, 14, which is report on communication. Here we have two reports, one on the joint CMS AEWA Information Management Communication and Awareness Raising Unit, and another one on the implementation of the AEWA Communication Strategy. First, I would like to invite Aidan Bahram-Luyen to take the floor on the report on the joint unit. Aidan, you have the floor.
Sorry, it's on. Okay. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. I will be presenting the first document on the implementation of the Information and Communication Management Unit. The CMS and AEWA collaborate on various programs and projects, as was mentioned this morning by the CMS Executive Secretary. One of these prominent programs where this integrated collaboration happens is in the field of communications and information management. In January 2014, the Joint Information Management, Communication and Awareness Raising Unit, abbreviated as IMCA, consisting of staffs of both CMS and AEWA Secretariat, was established as a pilot project in shared services in accordance with the decisions of the 19th meeting of the AEWA Standing Committee and the 41st meeting of the CMS Standing Committee. A year later, in 2015, through AEWA Resolution 6.22 on synergies between the UNEP AEWA and UNEP CMS adopted at the AEWA MOP8, the AEWA contracting parties further agreed to continue and refine this pilot unit, requested the AEWA and CMS secretariats to develop a proposal detailing implementation arrangement of the unit, including staff time, budget sharing ratio, management structure, monitoring and evaluation indicators, among other things, to be approved by the Standing Committee. The AEWA Resolution 6.22 has requested also the Standing Committee to review the progress of the implementation of IMCA unit and to report to MOP7 on the results and experiences of the arrangement and to make recommendations on the way forward. This report was submitted at AEWA MOP7 by the Standing Committee and looked at the institutional, financial, and administrative aspects of the relating to the IMCA unit, including 4 recommendations from the Standing Committee on the future management and operations of the joint unit. The Secretariat has also prepared regular reports on the implementation of the joint unit for each AEWA Standing Committee held since MOP7. Since its creation in 2014, the shared unit has consisted of staffs and consultants from both CMS and AEWA secretariats. The human resources allocated by each secretariat is defined by the 1/3 AEWA, 2/3 CMS, and it was therefore decided that the AEWA secretariat should receive 1/3 of the total staff time allocated to the unit. Shared activities such as the organization of the World Migratory Birthday Campaign and other, like management of the unit, are considered as joint activities that are calculated along the lines of 1/3 AEWA, 2/3 CMS formula. Over the past 8 years, there have been moments when this equilibrium was difficult to maintain, in particular to increase activities of the unit to different CMS COPs, for instance, or staff vacancies. And although in the past 2 years, 21 and 22, the balance has been respected, there is an existing legacy imbalance as of 31st of December 21 that amounts to 7 man-days in favor of CMS. IMCA has been operating with limited capacity for years. Additional resources and staff are necessary in order to further consolidate a team servicing 2 secretariats. Both executive secretaries of CMS and AEWA are working on addressing the issue through actions such as the increase of staff contributions by CMS with the recent appointment of the coordinator position as an example. The management, so the unit is managed by the IMCA coordinator, who acts under the direct supervision of the executive secretaries of CMS and AEWA. The coordination role was held by P2 AEWA staff since the start of the unit until 2020, then temporarily by a P4 CMS staff, and since February 2022, by the appointment of a P3 CMS staff. IMCA operations are based on an annual program of work that follows the staff administration cycle and is prepared by the coordinator, and following inputs by different units, it is approved and endorsed by both executive secretaries. This program of work of IMCA sets priorities, tasks, and time frame for all communications and information management projects and operations throughout the year, and is reviewed midterm by the Secretariat and IMCA itself. The unit, this is the current structure of the unit with the 1/3 AEWA, 2/3 CMS composition, and so as I mentioned, the coordination is held by P3 staff from CMS. The information assistant G4 from CMS is vacant, and there is a public information assistant G7 from CMS, an information officer P2 from AEWA, and an information assistant G5 from AEWA as well. As I mentioned, the unit is servicing both secretariats and is covering information management and communications, and some of the examples of our services are as described. So website mainly, and we are currently on the verge of finalizing a very large upgrade of the AEWA website, including with a larger CMS family website upgrade, and this should be finalized by the end of the year 2022. We also provide services for online reporting of the AEWA and CMS secretariats. And in terms of communications, we will have the next agenda item on the implementation of the communication strategy. So this covers campaigns such as World Migratory Birthday, which is a global campaign shared by the secretariats with other partners, and of course, management of various media such as traditional media, social media, and audiovisual production. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this report, and I would propose to take the other report, and then I will open the floor for any questions or comments. So I would invite Florian Kehl to report on the implementation of the AEWA communication strategy. Florian, you have the floor.
Do we have the presentation? Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chair. My name is Florian Kyle, and I'm Iowa's Information Officer and one of the team members working within the Joint Communication Unit, shared by the Secretariats of CMS, Conventional Migratory Species, and Iowa, located both in Bonn, Germany. I will give you a short presentation on the implementation of the communication strategy of Iowa. For a detailed summary of efforts by parties in the areas of communication, please see the Education Information section on the analysis of national reports for the triennium 2018 to 2020. The document is MOP8.13, as well as the relevant section of the analysis of the national reports on the implementation of the Iowa Plan of Action for Africa 2019 to 2020, document 8.15. As requested by Iowa Resolution 6.10, the Iowa Secretariat has provided a full written report on the implementation of the communication strategy to this 8th session of the meeting of the parties. The document number for this report is Iowa MOP 8.17. The document provides a review of the effectiveness of the strategy, as well as the summary of the main activities carried out by the Secretariat and the joint CMS and Iowa Information Management Communication Awareness Raising Unit. Its reach is from 2018, December, to today, basically, to the next MOP. So from one MOP to the next, the mandate is to report on the implementation. As the full report is available, I will keep this presentation as short as possible and only present some of the main points and highlights. To begin with, allow me to give you some important background. Iowa's communication strategy was adopted by the 6th session of the meeting of the parties to Iowa, held in Bonn, Germany, in November 2015, through Iowa Resolution 6.10. At the same meeting, parties also acknowledged the importance of funding to implement the communication strategy by adding additional wording to Iowa Resolution 6.18 on financial and administrative matters, which recognize, and I quote, the need to provide adequate resources to support the implementation of the communication strategy. Similar wording was also included in Resolution 7.12, again on financial and administrative matters, and adopted by MOP7 in Durban, South Africa. For those of you who have not read the document, Iowa's communication strategy is a light, somewhat timeless, 10-page strategic document that helps define Iowa's niche as a motor for flyway conservation across Africa and Eurasia. The strategy guides Iowa's communication work by helping to define Iowa's communication goals, roles, and communication principles under things like identifies things like target audiences and possible communication tools and channels. The strategy is a high-level strategic document that can be used by multiple actors, by the Secretariat, but also by parties and other stakeholders who want to engage in communication work to support the implementation of Iowa. The strategy is publicly available and can be downloaded from the website. I'm going to skip this slide. With the adoption of the Iowa Communication Strategy via Resolution 6.10, Iowa MOP6 parties have recognized the importance of communication for Iowa. They have also recognized that communication plays a key role in the implementation of Iowa on multiple levels. On the national level, within countries, at regional level, between countries, and on the international flyway level in terms of settling the global agenda. One of the main principles of the strategy is that communication should support the implementation of Iowa, but it is also recognizing the wider concept of CEPA, communication, education, and public awareness, and that communication in all its varied forms plays an important role in terms of generating public interest, political will, and long-term support for conservation. In sum, communication ensures that the work being conducted under Iowa is actually seen and recognized, and that it will be funded. In other words, communication helps to put Iowa and the activities under the agreement on the map. In terms of its usefulness, the document definitely fulfills its role as a high-level guiding document, fulfilling its overall aim and being a tool to help guide and focus the communication work of all relevant stakeholders, from countries to non-governmental organizations and other partners to support the Secretariat with the primary purpose of supporting the implementation of the agreement. Since its adoption by MOP6, the Iowa Communication Strategy has proven to be a useful tool and reference document clearly defining Iowa's communication objectives, niche and target audiences. And as such, it remains to be a key document for all Iowa stakeholders, as well as for the Secretariat, as it provides a strategic framework and valuable communication guidance for communication activities and implementation efforts. Yet in the end, the strategy is just a document. It needs people and a network of active communicators to actually come alive. And these people exist. Many of them are here in the room. When it comes to people, I would like to take a quick moment to mention two people. The first person on the left here is Olesya Petrovich from Ukraine, who has been acting as the thematic expert of SEPA on the Iowa Technical Committee since 2005. She was the first SEPA expert in the history of Iowa, and she was basically involved in chairing the SEPA working group within the technical committee. The other person on the right is Christopher Rostron, who, in accordance with the mandate provided by the meeting of the parties to the technical committee chair through Resolution 5.18, will be the new SEPA expert on the Iowa Technical Committee with effect as of the closing of this meeting. Chris has many years of experience in SEPA and also a big network and is someone who I look forward to working closely with in the coming years to really boost the SEPA work within the Iowa network. The other people I'd like to mention are our focal points. And we have national focal points who are ambassadors to the treaty, but we also have SEPA focal points. And to date, we have 45 Iowa parties have submitted SEPA focal points, but each and every focal point is a potential ambassador for communication. And in the run-up to this meeting, we received a number of video statements from focal points reflecting on the theme of this meeting. And it's an example of how every focal point can play a role, a very simple example, but it's a first example and a start. The other important person for communication is our executive secretary, who in a way is the spokesperson for the treaty on the global level, and someone who takes the interviews, especially when it comes to occasions like these MOPs. We have the occasion, a MOP, is also an important moment where the treaty is celebrated internationally, and it's an agenda-setting moment. And again, as we had in MOP7, the IMCA team has created a newsroom through which we're trying to capture the essence of this meeting. I encourage everyone in the room and all focal points to please use the hashtag and get active in your own networks, in your countries, and report about this meeting and about the outcomes and the important work you're doing yourself. In terms of the ongoing communication, the IMCA unit, shared by CMS in Iowa, has been busy all year long. The report that I mentioned, it just has every detail. 93 articles have been published on the Iowa website, and many, many other things are being done. What is interesting is the image on the right is the top story within the Iowa website news story, which received a massive amount of traffic, is the story that launched the World Migratory Bird Day on plastic pollution theme. The INCA team has also been very busy with the 25th anniversary during the 2020, and we had another good occasion for communication in this reporting year, where we collected statements from different parties, but also engaged in social media work around the 25th anniversary. To come up with the last slides, I just want to mention another important aspect of the work that the joint unit is doing, and that for many years, which is World Migratory Bird Day. It was created by CMS in Iowa back in 2006, and every year our small unit is organizing this campaign. It's a yearly campaign with a focused theme and something that is a marble, a jewel for communication. Through this campaign, we have managed to get CMS in Iowa and our other partner in America actively on the map as a real, global actor when it comes to campaigning for the environment. This year, the theme is light pollution, and we are basically days before the second peak day. As many of you know, World Migratory Bird Day is celebrated on 2 days each year, in May, second Saturday in May, and second Saturday in October. And I encourage everyone to, again, use this MOP for communications, but also this World Migratory Bird Day peak day coming up on the 8th of October to do communication for water birds, for migratory birds on a global scale, and for generally nature conservation around the world. And as a guiding tool, we've also produced a little strategic strategy with which you can find key messages and other things around this campaign that will be celebrated again globally on the 8th of October. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the report. And now I would like to open the floor for any questions or comments with regard to both reports, the one on the communication strategy and also for the joint unit. So if you have any questions, please raise it now. So it doesn't seem to be the case. Thank you very much. Both reports are noted. Thank you. With this, I would like to turn to item 15, the conservation status report. And I invite Szabolcs Nagy from the Wetlands International to give us a short summary about the 8th edition of the conservation status report. Szabolcs, you have the floor.
All right, okay, thanks. Tisztelt Elnök úr, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is my pleasure to give the first presentation today about birds. And I'm going to talk about the 8th edition of the Iowa Conservation Status Report. The Iowa Conservation Status Report builds on a number of other monitoring programs like the International Water Bird Census, the Pan-European Common Bird Monitoring Scheme, the East Atlantic Flyway status assessment, and other reporting processes like the EU Birds Directive reporting under Article 12, the European Red List of Birds, the National Population Status Reports under Iowa, the Population Status Reports or Status Assessments for West Siberia and Central Asia, where we now have many contracting parties, which we managed to pull together with the support of Switzerland and Norway as a first ever assessment, and builds on some older assessments, assessment of the status of tropical seabirds and birds in Africa by one of our report writing, Mr. Tim Dodman. So all of this information is assessed and triangulated for each of the Iowa populations, and the conservation status report builds on that information. For the individual populations, you can find the information on the water bird populations portal. So just to summarize our level of knowledge, more or less about 70% of both the population size estimates and the population trend estimates are based on census-based or expert opinion-based population size estimates or good or reasonable population trend estimate. However, these figures mask some important regional differences. You can see that in the West Asia, and the East African flyways where there are fewer contracting parties, the level of knowledge is also poorer, both in case of trends and in case of population sizes. In case of population sizes, we can still struggle with getting good population size estimates for most of Africa. And that relates to the monitoring capacity available there. And it underlines the importance of further capacity building for monitoring in that region. When we turn to population trends, one of the most important indicators in the context of the strategic plan, both in the short term and in the long term, we can say that about 43% of the populations are decreasing. And this is a higher proportion than the proportion of the populations which are increasing. So we have more Iowa populations decreasing than increasing, which actually should encourage us to increase those efforts, what you just heard in the WCMC reports about the implementation of the strategic plan or the implementation of the Plan of Action for Africa. Again, there are regional differences, and the pattern is again rather similar. We have the worst trends in the West Asia, East African flyway, but also populations in all of the African flyways are doing worse than in the Palearctic flyways or the long-distance flyways. Now I would like to turn to the indicators of the strategic plans and reiterate what you have already seen from Sergey. So the first purpose level indicator is focusing on all the Iowa populations, and the target was that 75% of the populations are stable or increasing. You can see on this chart that the solid line shows the target, and the dotted line shows the situation, the baseline situation at the previous reporting, so at CSR 7. And in case of this indicator, which is an overall indicator for all of Iowa populations, we can see a decrease. If we are looking at the priority populations, the target was that 55% of these are stable or increasing. You can see that in this case, we are below the target, but the situation has not worsened, at least. In case of the populations with unfavorable conservation status, which is under Iowa now provisionally defined based on populations which are listed in category 1 of column B or column C. So these two columns, basically 60% of these populations should be stable or increasing. We have a slight increase here. When we are looking at the next indicator, which shows that, basically harvested Iowa populations should be stable or increasing, we were not able to set a baseline at the preparation of the strategic plan, and we are still not able to tell what proportion of these populations are stable or increasing, because simply there is not enough information available at the Iowa Secretariat about which species and which populations are huntable in which countries. So this is something what we need urgently fill this knowledge gap, which is, if you think about it, that we are harvesting populations and we don't know which populations we are harvesting, or we don't know it collectively, this is really something serious problem we would need to resolve. The next two purpose level indicators relate to populations which are highly dependent on site networks and populations which are dispersed. And these two groups very broadly overlap because most of the waterbird populations might be either during the breeding season or during the non-breeding season congregatory, and in the other season they are dispersed. Just think about a lot of the duck species which are breeding dispersed in the Arctic breeding areas, but when they arrive to Europe, they are concentrated on a relatively few wetlands. So there is a big overlap between these two. The really worrying thing that we have a deteriorating situation for these species. And this is, on one hand, it's a worrying sign in the light of the 30-30 target for protected areas, so having 30% of the world surface protected by 2030. But it's also an encouraging in the light of the decade of ecosystem restoration. If this ecosystem restoration is actually implemented across the world as it is planned, maybe we can improve a lot of the situation for both of these indicators. So this almost concludes my presentation. If you felt too bored to read the 65 pages monochrome report amongst the meeting documents, I'm really happy to present you the colorful summary of the conservation status report, which is the first ever we managed to produce. And it's available both in English and French, and you can find it in your conference pack. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Szabolcs, for this presentation. And I ask the floor if there is any questions or comments with regard to this report. Yes, we have. Could you please raise the flag so I can see? Mauritius, please. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Your report highlights, the gaps in terms of implementation in the Eastern African areas and also in the Indian Ocean islands. And I would like here to show our appreciation and thank the AEWA Secretariat for organizing a capacity building workshop on next year, on February 2023, on a training of trainers workshop on flyway conservation, focusing on the Indian Ocean islands, on Comoros, Seychelles, and Madagascar. And the government of Mauritius is very happy to host the workshop over a 2-week period, and hopefully it will enhance capacity building of technical and the conservation network around the Indian Ocean islands. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mauritius. It's well noted. Any other questions, comments from the floor? I see none, so thank you very much for the report. It's noted. And with this, let me turn to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 16, the implementation review process. And here I would like to invite Sergei to present on behalf of the AEWA Standing Committee the report on the AEWA implementation review process during the period 2019 and 2022. The full report is available as document AEWA MOP8.20. So Sergei, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Much appreciated. I'm particularly happy to speak again, also because the strings of my face mask started cutting into my ears, and now I have a justification to remove it. But this is also a reminder to all of you to keep, please, your masks on all the time. So if you want to remove it, just take the floor. So, as the Chair announced, I will give a short presentation, a summary, really, of the report on the implementation review process on behalf of the Standing Committee, which you could read. It's a very lengthy document, very detailed for each case file. It's document 8.20. So a short introduction to the IRP, or the implementation review process. It's a process or a mechanism that was established by the 4th session of the meeting of the parties in 2008. And through that resolution 4.6, the MOP mandates the Standing Committee to address incidents of adverse effects or potential adverse effects on migratory waterbirds and their habitats or sites on which they depend because of human activities. A procedure after MOP4 was established, which in the first place established an IRP information sheet for possible case files, which is available on the AEWA website. And that means that anyone that has information that alludes to the possibility of such adverse effects can fill out that form, submit it to the Secretariat, and at that point, the Secretariat, when it's notified, forwards the information to the Technical Committee for an assessment and for an advice, which advice is being then transferred to the Standing Committee for consideration on whether to open an IRP case file. If the Standing Committee decides positively on opening a case file, the chair of the Standing Committee approaches the contracting party in question, requesting more information, and on the basis of that also considers the necessity to offer an on-the-spot assessment mission by an independent international crew that looks into the issue and reports back to the Standing Committee and outlines possible recommendations. Based on such a report from the mission team, the Standing Committee may decide to submit recommendations, either those that the team proposes or modified recommendations to the government of the contracting party. Depending on the complexity of the case, these recommendations could be provided to the government without such a mission. Simpler cases could be dealt with by correspondence. We had such cases. So this is more or less the procedure, and this is where the IRP originates from. It's a decision of this forum. So let's look into the statistics and the issues that the Standing Committee was dealing with in the last 4 years. In the period 2019-2022, the Standing Committee had to deal with 11 IRP case files. 3 of those were opened before 2019, and they concern Montenegro, Bulgaria, and Iceland. A larger number, double of that, were opened from 2019 onwards, since the last meeting of the parties, and these are case files in France, Kenya, Tunisia, Portugal, Germany, and Albania. We managed to actually close the first case file under this mechanism in the last triennium. And this was a case file in the United Kingdom. This was one of the shortest case files under this mechanism. This happened after the United Kingdom addressed the recommendations issued by the Standing Committee in a satisfactory manner. And we can be proud that this mechanism actually works and delivers results. Of course, this is only one case amongst other 11 cases, so there is still a lot of work to be done. We have one case on hold at this point in time in the Syrian Arab Republic, and that's because of the political situation in the country. And there is something which is called watching brief. It's another potential case file in France, which is not an active case, but the reports are invited from the government of France on a regular basis. So all in all, at present, we have 9 active case files under the IRP mechanism. And here on this chart, we have grouped them by category of current status. And these are 6 categories that we have outlined. There are 2 case files where there is outstanding reports from the governments of the respective countries. These are Montenegro and Iceland. Some of the reports are the latest ones we have received dating a few years back. So there is no really update on what has happened with respect to the implementation of the recommendations that both governments have received from the Standing Committee. There are 2 more cases in Bulgaria and France where currently there is no activity with respect to the issue that has been raised. So they're quasi-active case files. So there are no recommendations issued to those governments, but updates are invited from the government so that the Standing Committee is aware what is the status of those activities that have been a point of concern. There is one case which is fairly complex in Germany, where the Standing Committee needs more time to review information which is coming both from the government as well as from the petitioner, which submitted the initial information to the Standing Committee. We recently had, and this is not in the report because it happened after the report was issued, we recently undertook a joint on-the-spot appraisal mission to Albania together with the secretariats of the Berne Convention on European wildlife and wild habitats, and the Convention on Migratory Species. So this is a very fresh development, and there will be a report. It's currently in preparation, which will be submitted to the standing committees of all those treaties. We have two other case files where we ought to organize on-the-spot appraisal missions. They have been approved and agreed with the governments of Kenya and Tunisia. In the case of Tunisia, it's a joint mission with the Ramsar Convention. In the case of Kenya, it's an AEWA IRP case file, but we do have a number of observers which have expressed an interest to join that mission led by AEWA. The fact that they haven't happened so far is due to, first, the pandemic, second, financial shortage, a mission costs money, and also capacity in the Secretariat actually to progress that. So it's multiple reasons for not being able to advance those case files. And the last category, quite an unfortunate one, is where the government has declined to engage with the Standing Committee on a case file, and that's Portugal, the case of the airport construction in Tagus Estuary. So this is the brief introduction to what happened in the last nearly 4 years under this mechanism. So let's look into the way forward. And looking into the way forward, we have to look into what happened, actually. The first issue we need to face here is the sharp increase of case files in the last triennium. It's a 120% increase compared to the cases we dealt with before MOP7. We have also been informed informally of other potential case files that might be submitted to the attention of the Standing Committee. So when and if they will be submitted, we have to see, but the indication is that there is more that will be coming. So we won't stop at 11 cases. All cases require targeted attention and follow-up. They're fairly unique in their nature, and you need to approach them really individually. Some of those cases are particularly complex and require really a lot of time in investment in addressing them. Unfortunately, like in many other areas of work, we have to say here again that the Secretariat has a very short capacity. In this case, to support the Standing Committee sufficiently in their undertaking of this mechanism. There is a proposal, however, in budget scenario 4 to establish a position of a compliance officer, which will be addressing, amongst other issues, also the issue of the IRP, and could fill such a gap and actually play a role that will allow actually the Standing Committee to receive the support that is required from the Secretariat. But that position will be also working on many other compliance issues. You have seen from the presentations that our colleagues from WCMC showed earlier, particularly the analysis of national reports, that the rate of compliance on a lot of legal provisions under the treaty is fairly low. It's very, very low, in fact. And we actually need a targeted compliance program in the Secretariat to assist those countries which are not able currently to comply with the provisions of the treaty to do so, or at least improve their compliance. So with that, I'd like to wrap up this presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions on behalf of the Standing Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sergei, for the report. And I open the floor for questions or comments with regard to the report?
German.
Germany, you have the floor.
Yes, fine. Oh, sorry. Fine, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sergey. Yes, there's one issue that I like to address, and this is an issue where the Secretariat is already more than a year aware, and that is that Germany takes the case of the Bevix one really serious. We have invested 1.8 million euro for a project going into detail of this complaint case, and we like to analyze here what we can do for the Bevix one. The Secretariat was made aware of it. We even sent a link to that project, and a very important NGO, the NABU, is active here, so that we really not dealing with it from a governmental side, but from an NGO side, which makes the results serious. I will add this webpage for the minutes of this meeting, so that everybody has a chance to look in detail in it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Germany, for this information and for your engagement in the protection of the Bevix one. And I would like to give the floor to France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais, dans liminaire, comme c'est notre première prise de parole, remercier le gouvernement hongrois pour la qualité de leur réception et cette réunion. Peut-être en liminaire, avant de discuter sur le fond du rapport, rappeler, comme l'a dit le secrétaire exécutif, que nous avons 2 langues de travail, qu'à ce stade, encore un tiers des documents n'ont pas été traduits en français. Alors je comprends tous les efforts qui ont été faits par le secrétariat. Toutefois, cette absence peut poser un problème pour le travail des parties francophones. Et je pense que ça irait aussi dans le sens de l'accord, de l'objectif de l'accord, d'avoir ces documents au moins traduits, même si ce n'est pas en temps et en heure. Je voulais aussi peut-être préciser un point. Au-delà des cas qui ont été ouverts, nous avions un autre cas qui avait été mentionné dans le document. Il s'agissait du parc éolien d'Arjuzanx dans les Landes. Alors le cas n'était pas ouvert, mais il y avait des demandes d'informations. Les informations que je peux vous apporter, c'est qu'il n'y a plus de projet de parc éolien dans cette région. Et je aussi peux vous annoncer une bonne nouvelle, car dans ce lieu, c'est un haut lieu d'hivernage pour les grues cendrées. Donc j'ai le plaisir de vous annoncer la création d'une réserve naturelle nationale dans cette région. C'est un point important parce que il y a plus de 2200 hectares qui seront couverts. Et ce classement permettra aussi de lutter contre la pression foncière qui est importante dans la région. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Franz, and I would like to give the floor to the Executive Secretary to respond to your point.
Oui, je voudrais remercier la France d'avoir apporté ces éclaircissements sur le site d'Arjuzan dans les Landes, comme vous l'avez dit, au lieu d'hivernage des grues cendrées. Au sujet des traductions, je voudrais rappeler que l'AEWA a subi pendant plus de 10 ans des budgets sans accroissement, c'est-à-dire sans tenir compte de l'inflation et sans tenir compte également de l'évolution des salaires des personnels. Donc il a fallu réduire pendant 10 ans systématiquement les postes opérationnels et notamment sur les traductions. Fort heureusement, nous avons eu plusieurs pays qui nous ont soutenus lors de cette MOP8, ce qui a permis de traduire, comme vous l'avez remarqué, un certain nombre de documents. Nous avons essayé d'en traduire un maximum, mais il est vrai que tous ne sont pas traduits en français, alors que la bonne administration et la règle voudraient qu'ils le soient tous, puisque nous utilisons 2 langues dans l'accord. Et je souhaiterais effectivement travailler avec la France pour obtenir des financements supplémentaires afin d'avoir un ratio de traduction qui soit bien meilleur. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. If there are no other requests from the floor, I would take that we note the report of Sergei on behalf of the Standing Committee of the AEWA. And with this, I would like to turn to our next agenda item 28, institutional arrangement for the Standing Committee. And here I would like to invite our Executive Secretary to give us a short introduction to draft resolution number 10. I would like to remind you that draft resolution 10 will be discussed in the Finance and Administration Working Group, so any specific questions and comments should be raised in the working group. Jacques, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I will go very quickly. It's not the right one. It should be the other one, yeah, called Institutional Matters. This one is the next presentation. So while we are, thank you. Let's go, yeah. So I will just remember you that the Standing Committee has been established through Resolution 2.6, and it provides policy and administrative guidance between two MOPs. At each MOP, membership proposals are reviewed by parties, and any members can do 2 consecutive terms. It means six years, or in case of COVID, it would have been 7, yeah, 3 plus 4. So chair and the vice chair of the committee are elected by the Standing Committee right after the MOP. It means it's why we told you that after the closure of the MOP, there will be immediately a meeting with the Standing Committee. Of course, all parties which are not members of the Standing Committee are welcome to attend the work of the Standing Committee, and at each of the meetings we have many parties who participate and who comment and discuss with the member of the Standing Committee, and of course the chair of the AEWA Technical Committee is invited as well. Yeah. So the STC is comprising 7 members. 2 are automatically nominated. 1 is a permanent one. It is the AEWA depository. It is the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And we have also the host country. So for MOP8, it is Hungary. Then we have 5 regional members, 5 regional representatives, 2 for Europe and Central Asia, and 3 for Africa. For Africa, we have Eastern and Southern Africa as a region, and South Africa is the member. It is a vice chair also of our Standing Committee, and the alternate is Ethiopia. For Western and Central Africa, the member is Côte d'Ivoire, and the alternate is Nigeria. For the Middle East and Northern Africa, Algeria is the member, and the alternate is Egypt. Then for the Europe and Central Asia, we have 2 positions for the same region. United Kingdom is the first member and is chairing the Standing Committee. Luxembourg is the alternate, and the second member is Ukraine, and the alternate is Moldova. I should say that none of these 5 regional representatives have made more than 1 term. It means all of them could stay within the Standing Committee pending your decision. You can change the member, you can change the alternate. It's up to you at the regional level. So I would like to advocate that by Friday, you be able to propose either to confirm those countries or to propose other nomination, and we will fulfill the draft resolution with the name of the Standing Committee members. So that's a short summary, so please have a look at the draft resolution 8.10, and On Friday, we will ask 5 names, 5 volunteers, 5 countries. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for the Executive Secretary for this introduction. And as I mentioned, the detailed discussion will take place in the Finance and Administrative Working Group later this week. But if you have any initial or general questions or comments, please raise it now. The floor is open. I see no request for the floor, so thank you very much. Then with this, I would like to turn to our next and last agenda item for today. This is item 28, institutional arrangement, financial administrative matters. It's item 29, sorry for that. And I would also like, and again, I would like to invite the Executive Secretary to take the floor and present the report to us. The report on finance and administrative issues in the period 2019 to 2022, which is contained in document AEWA MOP8.38 Rev 1. And then another report on the proposed budget for the next triennium, which is contained in AEWA MOP 8.39 Core 1. So, Chuck, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, this is a special item for people who love mathematics. Yeah, mathematics. And during the working group this afternoon and tomorrow, we will go deeper into detail. But I would like to give you an overall presentation. And if any question, we have almost one day to go through all figures and formulas, which is even more difficult. So, I will begin with just a reminder how AEWA is financed. Yeah, it's really important. And we have 2 trust funds. When we talk about trust fund, we have one trust fund where all the mandatory contributions are sending. That is what we call the core budget. And we will discuss, of course, this core budget this late afternoon and tomorrow. It was roughly, for the last triennium, 1 million euros, and it's covered mostly salary cost. 3/4 of the budget is dedicated to pay staff. And we have another trust fund, in which we put the voluntary contributions. It's a dedicated trust fund, of course, and we receive between 300,000 to 450,000 euros a year, depending the project, if it's a MOP year or not. It's financed specific projects such as the AGMP, the European Goods Management Platform, consultancy, salary cost to increase part-time position, and so on. So it's really crucial to keep this voluntary contribution in mind, because as you can see, it's increased our budget from 30 to 40% a year. So the execution of the budget, as already mentioned by the chair, you have the detail in document 8.38. So I will go very quickly because the triennium is over. So the core budget was adopted through resolution 7.12, and due to the pandemic, you have accepted the proposal of the standing committee to adopt a budget through resolution exception X.3. So it was adopted through a silence procedure. To increase the chance to have a budget in 2022, the standing committee agreed that all party contributions were maintained with the same amount as invoice for the year 2021, which should have facilitated your life as a national focal point to explain to your minister or to the Ministry of Finance that, this budget has to be, and this contribution has to be paid. So the report 8.38 covers the period 1st January 2019, so right after MOP7 in Durban, till the 3rd of August, because we have this deadline to publish, of course, those documents. But we have tried to include a projection, of expenditures for the rest of the year, just to give you an idea of where we are standing. So what the results are. You have all the table in the document. I just pick up the result for each year. 2019, it was a negative end of the year balance of 83,000 euros. It was due mainly to over expenditure in both staff line, the professional category and the general service category. In 2020 and 2021, we have done better because in both years we have a positive end of the year balance of respectively 52,000 and 162,000 euros. For 2022, the protection shows a negative balance expected roughly 62,000 euros. So if I sum the 4 years, the balance should be positive, yeah, roughly 69,000. And of course, this positive balance in 2020, 2021 was mainly due to travel restriction because due to COVID, we have our TC meeting, we have a standing committee meeting, and even the pre-MOP were in virtual format. So, you give us money, we try to spend everything, but we try not to overspend our budget. So, for the specialists in the room, if you remember our trust fund for the core budget, we need to keep what we call an operative reserve of 171,000 euros. Because in the resolution and its UNEP rules, we have to keep in our trust fund either 150,000 euros or 50%, and we keep the highest amount. So it's explained this operative reserve. It is this operational reserve is supposed to cover some expenses if the contribution arrive late or if too many contributions are missing. So we have a kind of buffer to pay the staff salary cost, for example. So the trust fund is expected to be roughly at 156,000 euros when I deduct the operational reserve, but also all account payable and liquidity obligation. So it means we already calculate the salary we have to pay till the end of the year. So the situation is not too bad because it's a positive balance also, but I've noticed that since MOP5, this trust fund is decreasing. Year after year, it's more difficult to have a healthy trust fund. It's mainly due to 2 reasons. Too many unpaid contributions, and as an example, the contribution not paid in 2018 and previously amount 260,000 euros. So it's not a small amount, it's 20% of a yearly budget. And also, of course, the consecutive adoption of zero nominal or real growth scenarios for our budget for the past 14 years. So that's the execution of the budget. I just give you a short overview of the voluntary contribution, so you can see here the detail for the 4 years. And I've distinguished, of course, the voluntary contribution for our general activities, and we have a special account for the European Goods Management Platform, because as I explained to you, this special project is funded by Orange State dealing with goods management. Yeah. We don't have any precise data on in-kind contributions. It was something requested by MOP in the past, by 2 MOPs in the past, but unfortunately, despite the fact that some parties help us with in-kind contribution, and despite the fact that we request through a form to get data, we don't have any data, so I can't report anything about the in-kind contribution, but I can, of course, thank countries which have engaged themselves in, for example, hosting some meeting, like the first standing committee of the Triennium in Bristol, or any other technical meeting. I should mention, but it has already been reported earlier in the meeting, the African initiative supported by France, and also the resource project led by FAO and supported by the European Union. Yeah. So I would like to thank all donors. You have the list here, and I will mention it. We will take it because we are very grateful to all those countries and one NGO, so Croatia, Finland, Germany, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Norway, Switzerland, United Kingdom, and the Hellenic Ornithological Society, working on the lesser white-tailed fronted goose. So thanks to all of you, which have made some project happen. So, back. So, we spent all the money, we're not able to fulfill all our mandates. So we have developed, as requested, through Resolution 7.2, 4 budget scenario. And the detail is in another document, 8.39. The budget, as in the past, is split in 6 categories: general management with the staff costs, the travel, office maintenance, equipment. The coordination and implementation of the African initiative, it's mainly the 2 positions for the coordinator and the assistant. Servicing the meetings of the party, the technical committee and the standing committee. And on top of that, UNEP take 30% overhead cost. It is called the program support cost, so you can see quite often that we add 30% PSC, which means program support cost. It is supposed to cover the staff cost Nairobi engaged to help us. What is new in this budget is we have to implement a new software called Umoja. And in the past, it was paid first by New York, the secretariat in New York. Then it has been transferred to UNEP, and then in a cascade movement, it has been requested by all MEA, not only AEWA, to pay for this, the maintenance and the license of this software, this Enterprise Resource Program, ERP. We have to pay $2,000 per staff per year. The staff could work part-time or full-time, that's the same amount. So it means that for the scenario 1 to 3, we have to add to the previous budget 17,000 euros, and for scenario 4, because we create 3 more staff, of course, we have to add to 22,000 euros. For building our budget, we take into account an inflation rate of 2% a year. Of course, it's no longer the case in 2022. In some part of the world, it's rather 6 to 8, but we keep this ratio at the time we were drafting the budget, but we have not taken also the sharp evolution of the currency between euros and the dollar. You are adopting a budget in euro, and then Nairobi manage it in US dollar. So it's a headache there, but we can discuss it later during the working group. So the scenario 1 will allow us just to survive. It means there is no increase compared to the previous triennium budget. But we have, of course, the constraint is we have to add new cost, Umoja, and increase salaries, because salaries, as we get older, as most of the civil servant system in your country, who are paid a little bit more every 3 to 4 years. In that budget, to take into account this new cost, Umoja, and increased salaries. It means that we will have no budget for STC and TC meetings, and the STC agreed to have the next STC meeting online, which should be okay. For TC, it's far more difficult. There will be no potential saving to increase part-time position. So it means clearly that if you adopt the scenario 1, the zero nominal growth will not be able to carry out some of the mandatory tasks. So with the program of work we will discuss, it is an annex of the document I use for this presentation. We will have to discuss what the Secretariat should not be able to do. So in the document, you will see that the kind of document, we keep the same presentation from MOP5, 6, 7, just to allow you some comparison. And it seems that there is a small mistake in the figures. We will discuss this afternoon. For scenario 2, it's a zero nominal growth. So we stop bleeding, but it didn't mean that we were able to grow. So we take a 2% inflation rate per year. We, of course, based our calculation beginning in 2022. In that result, we are able to increase a little bit the post-occupancy of our administrative assistant. So from 50% to 80% for 2 positions, the African Initiative and the Information Assistant, and from 80 to 100 for the assistant of the Science Implementation and Compliance Unit. So it's a slight improvement. There is no need to fundraise the increased post-occupancy of the administrative assistant, but that's it. So we can consider this scenario as the minimum of the minimum. So same, you have a table, you can see more figures, of course, because we are able to allocate more operational costs here to organize, for example, the MOP and so on. So its situation is improving a little bit. For scenario 3, we have 2 criteria. We apply the UN rules for staff classification, and we would like to secure the African Initiative. It's one of our priorities as a Secretariat. It could not be the priority of the MOP, of the parties, but it's our proposal, and we discuss it, and the Standing Committee approved this proposal. So the principle is to upgrade all peace staff, all the professional posts, and we consolidate the African coordinator position, which is covered at 50% from the core budget to 100%. So it's a fair recognition of the staff and the staff dedication. There is no need to spend time for fundraising the coordinator position. So it saves time, and the African coordinator could concentrate on substantive matters instead of trying to find money to pay her salary. So I will not give you the figures, but of course, from each budget scenario, there is an increase. And scenario 4 was built to give the Secretariat the resources to fulfill the mandate. I didn't written all mandate because it's a matter of discussion, but at least we are able to fulfill the mandate. So, as we are understaffed, it has been shown in the past presentation, even the one on IRP, we propose to create 3 positions, a specialist officer, a P3 position, to deal with all action and management plan, not the GOOS, but all the other plan, an associate technical committee support officer, because as mentioned as the chair of the TC, there is really a need here to support the work of the TC. Most of the members are working pro bono, but we need to increase our support, and a compliance officer, and I refer to the last presentation of Sergei. So if you adopt scenario 4, of course, the human resources of the Secretariat should be adequate to respond to the mandates you are given to the Secretariat. So it's an increase. Scenario 3 is an increase of 19%. I'm back. And for scenario 4, it's of course a bigger increase. It's 24% compared to scenario 3. So we are aware that it's difficult for all of you to adopt a scenario 4. I should also mention that that is our priority, and we rank them from scenario 1 to scenario 4. But during the discussion into the working group, you can pick up one element of scenario 3, one element of the scenario 4, add it, for example, to scenario 2 to rebuild another budget. It's up to you, parties, to decide where the priority of the Secretariat should be targeted. Yeah. So contribution. Once we have a budget, I know that at least your financial officer will look at the figure, the final figure. Okay, so we say AEWA is a fantastic treaty, but how much it costs? And are we ready to buy it, to buy the service? So how the contribution are calculated? The principle is each party should contribute to the budget of the Secretariat, of course, and it's a UN rules. To share the global budget, we are progressively returning to the UN scale of assessment, which is adopted during the General Assembly every 2 or 3 years. This scale is a fair mean to share a budget and wisely used, of course, for all the UN instruments. And the new scale we have used to calculate and to build the scenario and then to calculate the contribution are the one covering the period from 22 to 24. So almost the same than our triennium budget, which was not the case at MOP7, if some of you remember. So we have a minimum contribution of 2,000 euros. It means no party could pay less than 2,000 euros. This was a decision made at MOP4. We have proposed a maximum threshold of 20%. So our first contributor, Germany, is close to this threshold of 20%. It means a party should not pay more than 20%. The EU contribution was fixed at the maximum of 2.5% of the budget. It is in the treaty for the Regional Economic Organization. So last MOP, all parties decided that we go up to the maximum for this regional organization. We also, in the calculation, decided to propose to you that no contribution should decrease compared to the previous triennium. It means that even if your UN scale is decreasing a little bit, you are staying at the same level, because we know that it's difficult when you are working in a ministry to explain that, okay, it has decreased for 3 years, but now it's increased again. So it's better. Financial people are simple people. They are nice, but they want simple things. So it's okay. No decrease, no discount, nothing. But it means if your contribution should have decreased, we maintain it at the same level. So often it's easy to present into your ministry, hopefully. And the saving we made, because of course, as there is a minimum contribution of 2,000, a party, for example, instead of paying 500, this party has to pay 2,000. So we are doing some saving, and this saving are used to decrease the most affected contribution with the highest increase. So it means that we have an Excel formula large like that. It's a bit complicated, and it makes the comparison between the different contributions from scenario 1 to 4 a bit difficult, of course. I agree. But we are here to explain to you in a world transparency, and during the working group, I have a colleague in Bonn ready to do any calculation for you, and if you rebuild a totally new budget, we will recalculate all the contribution. Let us have half an hour for the computer to do the calculation. So, in scenario 1, of course, no increase, except for 2 countries which have big issues with their economy. The economy was based on petrol. It was Algeria and Nigeria, and they get a discount of 50%, and MOP7 decided that it would be only one shot. And with the current crisis on energy, I hope that those two countries will see their budget, the national budget increase. In scenario 2, 20 parties will see an increase in their contribution. Scenario 3, it's 29, and in scenario 4, it's 33. So it's in scenario 4, 1/3 of the party will see an increase. So I will not go into many detail in the IRAs. I already mentioned it, that it's our possibility to reconstitute an LC reserve. You can see where your country is standing using this link. We publish it since 4 years, and it's very useful for you to see if your country has paid its contribution, and if not, how many years of IRAs. So you will see in the document the list of the parties, of course, in alphabetic order. You have the MOP7, then you have the calculation for MOP8, and you can compare scenario 1, 2, 3, and 4. We will have practical and training courses later this afternoon. So also, and it was a specific request of the Standing Committee, and despite the fact that it was really an headache to try to create this program of work, I would like to thank the Standing Committee because they helped us to draft this program of work. So through this quite detailed program of work, you can see what you get if you increase the budget. From scenario 1 and 2, same task, to scenario 3 and 4. So just to show you how the document is drafted. So what we will have to do by tomorrow evening is to review the budget, to build probably a new one, and to adopt it through the resolution 12. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for the report and also introducing us to the budget proposal for the next triennium. And I now would like to open the floor for questions and only general statements, because as I have already mentioned to you, the more detailed discussion should be taking place in the Finance and Administrative Working Group. So if you have any questions or general statements, just raise it now. The floor is open. I see no flags, so thank you very much for this. And with this, I'm happy to announce that we finished our today agenda for the plenary, and not only in time, but ahead of schedule. So thank you very much for your constructive spirit. Thank you very much for the constructive spirit and being focused in your interventions, and also for the presenters that they kept the time that has been allocated for them. Now the plenary will adjourn until the morning of Friday, 30 September. Now we will have a coffee break. Then the two established sessional committees, the Finance and Administrative Working Group and the Scientific and Technical Working Group, will convene for their first sessions from 4:30 this afternoon until the end of the day, until 6 o'clock. The working groups will continue their business tomorrow during the entire day, and shall conclude by 6 o'clock tomorrow evening, or continue working without interpretation afterwards. The Finance and Administrative Working Group will meet in the secondary plenary room outside, and the Scientific and Technical Working Group will meet in the main plenary room here, in this room. And I would like to ask the Secretariat if it has any announcement for us.
Thank you, Chair. It's quite encouraging that we completed the business exactly according to the time budget we have put together. So congratulations to everyone. As the Chair announced, the working groups will convene at 4:30. The coffee break practically will be available from 4:45. So what we suggest is that you use the extra 15 minutes you have until the official start of the break to actually move between the rooms depending on which working group you're going to attend. Because we know that a lot of people from the secondary plenary would like to join the scientific and technical, and some of the people in this room would like to go to the finance and administrative working group. So for the delegations which have more than one delegate, if you have more than one Toblerone here in this room, please take it with you to the next room. If you have only one, if you split, obviously. If you all stay here, there is no need to go to the other room and leave the Toblerone there. But if you have only one Toblerone and you're going to split, you'll receive a second one in the other room. So there will be a member of the staff that you could approach. There will be Toblerone standing on a trolley. Just approach and request, and you'll receive one. The same applies for the delegations in the other room. There we don't have country delegations. All countries, all parties have their seats here, just the extra beyond the 4 seats available here are in the second room. But there might be other observers that would like to split and join both working groups. So if you have, again, in the secondary plenary room, if you have only one Toblerone and you would like to split, please approach the colleagues in the secondary plenary room because they have all the Toblerones. So this is a slightly of a logistical complication, but I'm sure we all will manage to handle it. So now it's nearly 3:45. So with your permission, Chair, we would suggest that you adjourn the meeting now. You do the split. We will facilitate the seating, particularly in this room, because we expect that there might be some shortage of space. And then from 4 o'clock, hopefully by that time, we will manage to fix the seating. From 4 o'clock, you can enjoy a coffee break, and please convene, be sharp at 4:30 or even a bit before 4:30 in the rooms so that the business can start sharp at 4:30. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I would like to wish all of you a good and successful discussion in the working group, and see you back here in this room on Friday morning at 9 o'clock. Thank you very much, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.